sure that they can provide their families a better life. So we have to be about the future even as we're fighting these fascists.
To have breakfast the other day with stand-up brother Schlossberg, who's running for Congress, and not that I'm promoting his candidacy, but he's running for Congress. Not that I'm going to bring it up, but he's running for Congress. And he and I had breakfast, and we talked about his grandfather, President John F. Kennedy was his grandfather. And I told him, and we had a discussion, that all of what happened, Cleola, that A. Philip Randolph and others did, started into the Kennedy administration that led to him being demonized. And he was assassinated in November of '63. We passed the Civil Rights Act in '64 based on what he had really started that worked well in the '60s. You got to remember, Dr. King and President Kennedy never had a cell phone.
That's right.
Never had Twitter. Never had all these ways to communicate and have nothing to say. I mean, can't get 4 people together to a block association meeting. What do we need to do?
You're starting with me, Rev? You're starting
Yes.
with me? Okay. Well, the points that you made needs to be understood, that everyone did not have, they did hear you say that we have to talk with people rather than talking at people. That remains one of the most solid pieces of information that I've received in a long time. Nothing. It is guaranteed to get out before you can get out the yard. We have to use that common sense that he reminds us of all the time to get the stuff done. A part of it, too, I'm quoting you because you've taught a lot of us a lot. Follow. You taught us that if somebody does something, congratulate them for doing it, don't take all the credit yourself.
That's right.
Because otherwise, why are they going to show up for you to come and do something if you're going to never recognize them then? I'm going to ask you, as you sit in your seat, reach over to the you. I know how hard you're working. Let them know that they mean something to you. Now, that's how Rev teaches us to do stuff. And if we listen to the lessons that we're getting from one another, we can make some stuff happen. But also, what National Action Network has told us is don't work in no silo. If we're doing something, don't think that it's only us that have to do it. We need to partner with people. Randy had her book stuff going. What I did was beg her to give us some books, and wherever APRI was going, we would share those books and share the message. We did it all over the country for every place we went. We didn't take the credit for it. We said that AFT saw this initiative, and while they were threatening their sister over there, who may be short in stature but stand 9 feet tall in her courage, all right? She stood up to them and said, you will not dictate what our history will be when we start to teach about our history or the importance of all of us that are out there. We can't work in those silos, but we have the same relationship with LIUNA. Rev called on us to be a part of the march here, the March on Wall Street. He don't ask you to come, he tell you to come, right? So I called the brothers and sisters here in New York and said, look, LIUNA, y'all got to turn out some folks so that we can show up. By the time we got here and got in line, Rev was bossing me around and all the people from LIUNA and everywhere else, but we lined that street on that march on Wall Street.
That's right.
So using those resources. When we did the pieces with AFT, as I mentioned before, when we did the pieces with the example that Lee set out with AFSCME, because they had a mean green lean machine, Lord Jesus, those are the rowdiest folks I know, and you want to be with them when you hit the street. And if you are, you know you're going to get some stuff done. But you can name union after union. If we learn to be inclusive and acknowledge the work of others, we do a better job. So, Rev, to answer your question, we've got to be inclusive.
Eric?
Everything she said, I mean, it's not much left, okay, all right? But realistically, as the Rev said, during that time, they only had rotary phones, a piece of paper, a flyer. And it's really ironic that we have all this social media and the lies are being told on social media. And, you know, where do the people go back and get their information? They go to the comments in social media. They don't go for the facts. So it goes back to, as Rev and Lee Saunders said, it comes back to talking to each other, okay, all right? As he said, you know, how they growing that 100 million, that was going back and knocking on each one of those doors, having those one-on-one conversations, challenging the issues before them, okay? Because we can't depend on social media. As Rev said, sometimes we can't even get 5 people in a room, okay, all right? But if you give them something away free, they'll be there, okay? They'll be there in a minute, all right? So it comes down to communication, and it's not going to take one time. You're going to have to constantly speak with these individuals. Bring our young people around who believe in social media before they believe what the real truth is, okay, all right? But everything else this young lady said is how we're going to do it.
All right. Man.
I'll second and third what you all are saying, but I will also just add, and one of the things that our union's proud of is the organizing work we've done to give respect and dignity to security officers, and we could not have done it without the partnership of National Action Network and you yourself, and we appreciate that. And we recently passed legislation here in New York City that will raise the wages, provide health insurance, and give benefits to not just the 20,000 unionized security officers, but all 50,000 security officers, whether they're in the union or not. And we did that not in a mass mobilization, but through the partnership and coalition work. Yes, there were people, there were security officers, but I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of the people in this room, the power of unions, the power of people coming together to fight for what's right, and I think we can make change.
Randy.
I think if we don't believe that we can do things, then we're not going to do it. We have to we have to believe in ourselves that there's a possibility of a better future. We have to believe in each other, as Clay just said. And I think we have to create the infrastructure like the March on Washington did in so many years ago, like the No Kings movement is doing. The No Kings movement is not the coalition for everything on everything, but what it is about is people looking at each other and saying, I am not alone in having misgivings about what's happening in this country right now. And there's a whole lot of other people who are also having misgivings and are willing to, in a nonviolent way, be on the streets and do that. And so could you imagine if we had even a bigger, bolder coalition led by Rev, led by so many others, led by labor, led by democracy organizations, led by the civil rights organizations, and in September or October of this year, we have 15 million people on the streets, and then we do the mutual aid we need to do to get to the ballot box and win in November. So a belief in ourselves and in each other that we have the capacity to change, creating that organizational structure, and then doing what we have to do at the ballot box to actually have a better country.
Last but not least, our board member, national board member, and the man of the hour, president of AFSCME, Lee Saunders.
I think it's real simple what we have to do. We have to organize, mobilize, educate, make our voices heard, get in the streets, and raise hell every single day. I mean, that's what we've got to do. We cannot accept what's going on in this country right now. We cannot be on the defensive all the time. We can't play whack-a-mole with a fool in the White House. Okay? We can't do that. We can't do that. You know, Rev mentioned this in opening up this panel discussion and talked about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you can think about back then, 1,300 sanitation workers, African American sanitation workers, going on strike in Memphis, Tennessee, because they were fed up and they were sick and tired of being mistreated by the boss. They saw one of their own crushed in a sanitation truck because he was trying to get out of the bad weather. And there was a mechanical malfunction when he got into the truck, in the back of the truck, and it crushed him to death. And the city refused to recognize those men who provided those services every single day as human beings. You know what? We're kind of reliving that right now. I don't want to compare what happened in Memphis to what's comparing to us now. But what I will say is this. We've got to be bold, and we've got to have the strength, and we've got to have the fight within us to do exactly what those sanitation workers did. And they said, hell no, we aren't taking it anymore. And we're going to fight back, and we're going to make our voices heard. And guess what? When they did that, and then when they stood up, people came and supported them and rallied around them. Dr. Martin Luther King, our community allies and friends, in saying this is not just a fight with sanitation workers. This is about a fight for dignity, a fight for making this country what we all want to see it to be. And because of that coalition coming together and fighting together, we were able to win in the city of Memphis at a great cost. At a great cost. But we've got to have that same spirit. And we've got to have that same energy right now. And I'm asking everyone in this room, we cannot play on the defensive all the time. We've got to get on the offensive. And that's exactly what we will do. And we will get on the offense, and if we do it the right way, we will win in November. Make no mistake about it. But it's going to take us collectively, to get the job done.
All right, give them a hand, our labor leaders. Randy Weidengarten, American Federation of Teachers, Lee Saunders, Manny Pastrick, and of course, to our Cleola Brown, our real queen, A. Philip Randolph Institute. Give them all a big hand. Eric Bunn of National American Federation of Government Employees. I'm going to bring back our legal panel. I want to go through criminal justice. And then my last thing, and I'm going to let y'all get ready for the dinner tonight, is Roy Connor, the congressman that's really been dealing with the Epstein files and the victim, is going to do a fireside chat before I let you go for today to get ready for the dinner tonight. But Roy Connor's flown in to be with us. So give me 2 minutes, and I'm going to get our... All right, well then bring them on. Let me have Ben Crump bring on our legal panel, criminal justice, my friend, Brother Ramanucci, and
Yes.
now let me say this as, where's Alvin? All right. We got our own vice chairman of the board, Attorney Jennifer Jones Austin, and she's vice chairman of the board. And, of course, Ben Crump, Attorney General of Black America, and Attorney Ramanucci, who, sit here, don't worry about the sign, I'm in charge. I want y'all to know Attorney Ramanucci worked with Ben and therefore us that were coordinating in the community on George Floyd's case. And he's now And he's now one of the attorneys for Renee Good's family that was killed in Minneapolis. And he changed his travel plans to be with us today, but he's not one of those that you're going to see. He doesn't call me to get on TV, but he's in the trenches doing real work. And I saw him, I mean, every day huddling there with Attorney Crump, getting us through it, which got convictions, by the way. And clearly, we're honored to have him, and Jenny and I honored, because I can't say we're honored to have Jenny because this is her organization, she's vice chair. Y'all don't take these Kennedy pictures. I'm having a session. Yeah, all right. Come here a minute, Jack. Since everybody want to take your picture, I'm going to let you go out the other exit. This is the President Kennedy's great grandson who's running for Congress and my new friend. You want to say?
Hey everybody, I'm so happy to be here. You know, I got to meet Reverend Sharpton, speak to him over breakfast a couple days ago, and I mean, this person does not get tired. I don't understand. You are doing so much more than anyone that I know to advance the cause of civil rights. You've been doing it my whole lifetime. You did it a whole lifetime before I was born, and you're still doing it. And you know, it just gives us all, young people especially, someone to look up to, an example to learn from. And I just really, it's great to be here. I don't want to take too much. I'd much rather hear from the panel than from me, but I'll say I'm running for Congress. You're sitting in the district that I would represent. And our campaign slogan is believe in something again. As Randy Weingarten was saying, we don't believe in anything anymore. How are we going to solve problems if we don't believe in ourselves? Amen. I still believe in politics. It's broken, but I still believe. Reverend Sharpton said something to me over breakfast that really stuck with me, and he said, President Trump is trying to dismantle the 60s and everything that was fought for in the civil rights movement. And you know, we forget this sometimes, but President Trump made DEI illegal. He made diversity illegal on his first day in office. He made it illegal to have diversity programs. We got to see this for what it is. We have to stand up, organize, and you know, I'll leave it at that, but I'm so happy to see all of you here today, and I hope to get to meet you. So, thanks.
Let me say, NAN is a nonpartisan organization. Any of his opponents here? All right, good. So we shared up who showed up. I always believe in showing up for who shows up with me. Give him a hand. Thank you for coming by, Jack. Attorney Ben Crump.
Thank you, Rhea. Hey, we're waiting for District Attorney Alvin Bragg, so if he comes, we'll bring him up. You know, Reverend Al is kind of like the person who is not a lawyer, but he plays a lawyer on TV. He's a great co-counselor. Again, give it up for our civil rights leader, our champion of justice, Reverend Al Sharpton. And as we begin this panel, we have about 30 minutes because we're going to try to make up for time, so we're going to get right to the crux of the matter. But it really goes to what Dr. King said in his letter from the Birmingham jail. You know, everybody knows the part, Attorney Ramanucci, where he says injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But I submit to you, sisters and brothers, I think equally important in that letter is when he said, just because they tell us it's legal, that doesn't make it right. And he said, we must remember that everything Hitler did to the Jews in Germany, they said was legal, but that didn't make it right. Dr. King said, we must remember that they said slavery was legal, but that didn't make it right. He said, we must remember they said segregation was legal, but he said that didn't make it right. And he said everything they did to that little boy in Money, Mississippi, named Emmett Till, they tried to tell us it was legal, but we must in unison say, but that don't make it right. And I got to tell you, sisters and brothers gathered at the National Action Network Convention on April 8, 2026, it is a lot of stuff that this Trump administration is trying to tell us it is legal, but we must all stand up in unison and say, but that don't make it right. Amen? So we begin there with our incredible panel of extraordinary lawyers. As Reverend Sharpton said, Tony Ramanucci is our brother from another mother. He is one of the leaders of the trial lawyers, head up the congressional delegation to elect lawyers that uphold the Constitution, elect politicians that believe in the Constitution. He was my co-counsel on George Floyd, where we got historic justice. We fought for Botham Jean. Y'all remember the young boy who was shot in his own apartment when the white policewoman came in and they said, you know, she was mistaken, and then she said self-defense after she killed him. Well, we got a $98.5 million verdict on that case. That was great work of our legal team. And now we're fighting for justice for Tyree Nichols. Again, Tony Ramanucci.
Thank you.
And as Reverend Al said, she is the vice chair of the National Action Network Board, CEO. She is a force of nature, and as I've always said, Jennifer, it's always brilliant black women who make us brothers look better than we ought to look. So thank you for all making all the black men around you look good. Thank you, Jennifer. And so with that, we're here because April 26 is not April 2025. 2 years into this Trump administration, things have changed. Some changes you see on the news, but most you don't. On this stage, we will have a district attorney join us. We have a community policy leader in Jennifer, and we have a civil rights lawyer in Tony Ramanucci and myself. They work inside the system every day. They will tell you what is real, not what sounds good on stage. The first question for the panelists, and everybody can tell it from their own perspective, is tell us one thing the Trump administration has done since 2025 that made your job harder. And you can say, I know you got several, but just give us one or two things, Mr. Ramanucci.
Thank you, Ben. And you understand why I walk in this man's shadow. I am so honored to be here, Ben, and Reverend Al, and everybody from the National Action Network. Thank you so much. So my one word, and then I'll explain, is zero. Zero. Zero investigations, zero prosecutions, zero cooperation when it comes to federal law enforcement officers. Have they made the job more difficult? You bet they have, because without investigations, they create hurdles for us to seek justice. And as Ben and I like to do when we crisscross the country representing people who have been aggrieved by police officers, shot and killed needlessly, had their constitutional rights violated, we seek civil justice, criminal justice, administrative justice, legislative justice. We seek all prongs of justice. And when somebody puts a brick on your ability to investigate what you know is wrong, Ben was talking about legal but not right. How about illegal and never right? Right? Okay. Illegal and never right. And when you can't investigate, that's what makes our job more difficult. Does not make it impossible. It just makes it more difficult.
Illegal and never right. That might sum up this administration. Jennifer?
The fact that Donald Trump has taken an axe to pretty much any and all programs that advance opportunity for people in communities of color, for low-income people, that has been the greatest challenge. And why? Because in this nation, we know that if you do not have economic security, if you do not have the ability to take care of your family, you're going to struggle. And one of the things that people don't often know and appreciate is that research demonstrates that in America, 40% of crimes are attributable to poverty. Now, that doesn't mean that poor people are more likely to commit crimes because they're bad people. It means that a lot of crimes are happening because people can't meet their basic needs, right? If you can't buy bread and you need to feed your family, you might resort to something you otherwise would not do, right? You have access to a credit card in your workplace, but you can't afford to buy your children clothes at school time. I'm not excusing it, but 40% of crimes are attributable to poverty. 80% of people who are incarcerated in America self-identify as having little or no income. So when we have a president who takes an axe to critical income support programs, when he cuts off DEI, when he cuts back on college access, eliminates the ability to get student loans for graduate school, and cuts back on the repayment opportunities, the loan forgiveness afforded people in communities of color in the main. When you see all that happening, an erosion of medical benefits, food supports, what does that do? It makes vulnerable people all the more vulnerable. And in this society, we don't really talk about it. We talk about race and crime. We talk about poverty sometimes and crime, but we don't talk about race, poverty, and crime. And what he has done by axing programs and funding that helps people to build economic mobility and opportunity is essentially put more of us on the pipeline to being justice involved.
Amen. The cost of justice. Thank you for breaking it down, Jennifer. You know, sisters and brothers, I'm not shy about it, and Tony and probably every civil rights lawyer who had the fortune of having Reverend Al counsel us, we tell you he's one of our best co-counsels, even though he ain't got a law degree. And I call on him frequently and often in the middle of the night sometimes. And I want to call on him while we have him sitting on the panel. Reverend Al, you taught me very early on why we needed to have the federal Department of Justice involved, especially fighting in southern states for marginalized people, especially black and brown people. Can you share with National Action Network Conference why you think the deficit in the Federal Department of Justice is so devastating to us today?
Well, I think one of the reasons, and I didn't know sitting here would get me back in trouble, but anyway, one of the reasons that it is so important, particularly in civil rights history and in National Action Network history. National Action Network was started in 1991. I'll give you an example, which will explain what I'm answering your question.
Yes, sir.
In that year, we were helping to fight the case of Rodney King in L.A. Rodney King had been beaten by police, LAPD, on tape. Yeah. A guy who didn't know him, just happened to be filming, white citizen. And if it hadn't been for the tape, God only knows what they'd have said about Rodney King. The beating of Rodney King led to riots in L.A. And we went out and joined some of the local activists in demanding justice, as we was also saying we need nonviolent protests, because playing into the violence will only make us look like what they want. They want to say Rodney King was out there to do wrong, so you doing wrong makes it look like Rodney King was doing that. We fought the case. They got all the way into the state court. Finally, the police were prosecuted. But local politics kicks in when you deal at the state level. It happened to us in New York with several cases. Because local state judges, local state juries are different. So you always went to the federal courts when the state courts were too politicized against you.
Yes, sir.
And we lost the case. Those police were acquitted of beating Rodney King, even though the whole world saw the videotape.
Yep.
They said, don't believe your lying eyes. And they acquitted them. We went to federal court and convicted 2 of those police because the federal court took supersession. And this is what we did 30-some odd years. With Trump in office, appointing the federal judges and having the federal prosecutor, the Attorney General, it has taken that option off the table.
Yeah.
So as we sit here April 8, 2026, we have nowhere to go on any of these cases, because you cannot say if the state fails us, we can go to the feds. The feds won't even pick up an investigation.
Amen.
Because they are committed to not deal with civil rights cases. He has said that.
Yeah.
We're not making this up. He said that. So that's why I tell people that come November, you're not voting for a Democrat or voting for a candidate. You're voting for your own self-protection.
Amen. And just a quick follow-up on that, Reverend Al, because it's breaking news everywhere. Obviously, we saw what they did in Louisville, Kentucky, when the Department of Justice petitioned the federal judge to dismiss the charges of the officers who were convicted federally for killing Breonna Taylor. And,
that's right.
And now we're dealing with a case just as close with Tyree Nichols in Memphis, because they're doing the same thing. Have you ever seen anything like this by the department or prosecutor saying, we got a conviction and now we saying we don't want to drop the charges?
No, it's never been done that I can see where they want to drop charges that were convicted, a jury convicted. Yeah. And they say, don't worry about what the jury said. And they just undermined it. That is why I'm saying that this is not about winning an election, which party you like. They are undermining everything that has been established to protect all of our rights. When a federal prosecutor or a U.S. attorney or an attorney general can negate a jury verdict, then we are not on our way to a totalitarian state. We're almost there.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Al, for your leadership now more than ever. Yes, ma'am, Jennifer.
I have seen cases of the reverse.
Yeah.
Where a judge will see that a jury misunderstood the facts and apply them to the law, and then will actually say, this person is not, you didn't see it, they're not guilty. This was self-defense, or they were acting under duress. But not the flip, where, this person should go home after you've convicted them. None of that.
We're living in, the intellectual justification of discrimination, because Rev didn't say this, Jennifer didn't say this. I think they did it because they were black people who had got justice, and they want black people to believe that we can't get justice in America. And even though we can't go to the Department of Justice for help, we can come to the National Action Network to get help, to get justice for our people. Now more than ever. Now more than ever, we got to stand up, we got to be willing to speak up, and we got to be willing to fight for justice, because if we don't fight, they ain't gonna give us no inch of justice. We got to go take it. Amen? Amen. And Attorney Ramanucci, as Reverend Al said, you represent our sister Renee Good and her family who was killed by ICE. Can you talk to us about the atrocities that you have seen that ICE has engaged in with the authority of this Trump administration?
Well, I can almost speak from it firsthand, because I am from Chicago, and Chicago was part of what's called Midway Blitz, which is another one of the acronyms that they use to come in and have American troops invade our American cities. And so we were at ground zero for that. We were somewhat prepared, and we represent a lot of people from Midway Blitz who had their civil rights violated by ICE and CBP and other federal law enforcement officers. But what they didn't realize is that you don't go into Minneapolis when it's cold. They learned a big lesson, because I guarantee you they figured that they were going to go into Minneapolis and root out this so-called corruption that they found in the community, and think that they were going to do it under cover of night, except it was under cover of cold. And you don't mess with Minnesotans when it comes to cold, because guess who won that fight? You better believe it.
Amen.
I spent a lot of time in Minneapolis after Renee Good was shot, and it was a struggle for me to be outdoors, literally, for the hours that I was. But for the folks out there, they knew how to fight, and that's how they won. What we saw in Minneapolis is beyond literally atrocious. I mean, it is criminal what was going on there with ICE, how they were violating people's rights, not 1 time per day, 10 times per day, but hundreds of times per day. And what you see on the video, what happened to Renee Good, don't let anybody fool you. Don't let anybody gaslight you. Don't let anybody else tell you a cover story. You see exactly what you saw. Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Steve Miller, Todd Blanche, wipe those, whatever they said about what Renee or her fiance was, not true. Those words, which I won't even deem to repeat, DR, and you know what it stands for, or DT, I apologize, nothing even close to the truth. This was a mom dropping off her children back on the way home, and the temerity that they had to call her those words was really crime right there.
Hey, thank you so much, Tony. And like Reverend Al has said on many occasions, we stand for justice. It doesn't matter if the victim is black, white, brown, or red. We stand for justice and the fight for civil rights for all Americans.
Thank you, Ben.
So thank you. I will tell you this. As Black America's Attorney General, I try to live up to Reverend Al's proclamation. And it's real simple. What ICE is doing is a complete assault on the Constitution in every way. I mean, in every way. When you think about the assault on the First Amendment right to freedom of speech and right to assembly and right to the press, I mean, y'all saw they arrested Don Lemon in Georgia Fort for just trying to report on what their devious conduct was. And then you talk about the Second Amendment, they attacked that with our brother Alex Peretti when they said, you know, he was a law-abiding citizen, he had a license to carry a firearm, and you saw the 4 or 5 officers shoot him 10 times, even though he never reached for the weapon or anything. And what did they say, Jennifer? They tried to say, well, you can't have a gun at a protest. And we scratching our heads, Reverend Al, because Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old white teenager, bought an AK-47 to Jacob Blake Black Lives Matter protest, shot 2 people, killing one of them, and they called him a hero. I mean, it's just crazy. Then the Fourth Amendment, I mean, the assault on the Fourth Amendment against unreasonable searches and seizures, I mean, it is a shame before God. They are kicking in people's front doors with no warrant, no probable cause, based on racial profiling. I mean, they're busting in people's windshields when they're driving. You all have seen it all on TV and social media. I mean, it is something I cannot believe, Jennifer. Our United States Supreme Court said that it's okay for them to racially profile people. And it's a shame. And you think about the Fifth Amendment, right to due process of the law, but you have the people in the highest levels of government without any investigations, as Tony said, without any due process, saying that whatever the officers did were justified. I mean, America's one of our most cherished principles as Americans have always been that we are innocent until proven guilty. But now, based on racial profiling, they can stop you and you are presumed guilty until proven innocent. It's just unbelievable. And then the Sixth Amendment, the attack on the right to counsel. We have sisters and brothers who are American citizens, and they're detained in these ICE facilities. And Attorney Ramanucci, people want to be able to have consultation with their lawyers. Their lawyers are there at the detention facilities, and they won't even let them come in. Y'all heard about Congressman McIver. They won't even let people look at what's going on in those ICE detention facilities. So you have citizens having to go to court and go against Department of Justice lawyers, and they are by themselves. They have nobody, and it's so sad, Reverend Al. You have little children, 5, 6, 7 years old. Y'all seen these, our little Latina sisters and brothers, these children in a courtroom sitting at a table by themselves while they are being litigated against by the Department of Justice. I mean, it's not like it's America, it's like it's a third world country. And I got to tell you all, sisters and brothers at National Action Network, you know, it's our Latina sisters and brothers today. But in Minneapolis, they were trying to racially profile people from Somalia. And then in Florida, they are trying to profile our Haitian sisters and brothers. And so I'm just here to tell y'all, a lot of y'all might be able to be resembling people who look Haitian or look like Somalian. So it's our Latina sisters and brothers today. But if we don't all stand up together and fight this racial profiling, it'll be on our brothers and sisters' doorsteps tomorrow.
That's right.
And a complete assault, we're going to get back. It's heavy on my heart. The Eighth Amendment, the way they're attacking the Eighth Amendment right against cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, they got American sisters and brothers in these ICE detention facilities. And not just even American citizens, but just even if they're undocumented. They are children of God. Where's the humanity when people need their insulin? When people need their heart medicine? I mean, we had a Haitian brother who called our office. He had a tooth infection. He needed treatment, Tony, and they would not give him treatment. And 6 weeks later, he was dead. Oh. I mean, and nobody's talking about it. And that's why we need Reverend Al on Politics Nation, and we need National Action Network, because we can't get no assistance from the Department of Justice, because it reminds me of what Ida B. Wells said, the great black news journalist. She said the killers are writing the police reports.
That's right.
Let me say this before you go on. I know I'm not on the panel, but I want to recognize Dr. Stacey Grant, who's the international president of Zeta Phi Beta has entered. I just want to recognize our fellow national leader.
Thank you, Rev, Dr. Grant. Jennifer, Washington is reviewing federal grants for housing, reentry, and violence prevention. This is your network's lifeblood. Has any of that money actually stopped yet? And instead of asking churches to replace that money, which they can't, what is the smartest move right now? Lawsuit, lobbying, or something else?
So a couple of things. Just a lot of what you shared reminded me of what I was told when I was leading the New York City Racial Justice Commission by the General Counsel to Bishop Desmond Tutu's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He said to me, be ever mindful that those who created the system created it to persist. He kept reminding me that whatever you do, remember that the people who put these nations together did so for self-serving purposes.
That's right.
When they created the laws, including the Constitution, they did it for self-gain. They didn't do it with the best interest of people who they'd enslaved in mind. And if it was necessary to tear down that system if it was no longer working, that's what they would do. The other thing I'm reminded of are words that my father penned when he said, you know, essentially what we're dealing with is a trinity of racism, capitalism, and militarism, all working to continually oppress people of color and uphold the system. So why are we seeing the surge in militarism in the form of ICE and other? It's because it's a way of intimidation. When you take government forces that should be operating elsewhere and you sic them on your own, essentially what you're trying to do is to get people to submit to that which is unjust. So that's what we're dealing with right now. And then you layer that with an administration, with a president who has essentially already reduced nearly $1 billion in housing supports, reentry supports, recidivism programs for people who are returning from incarceration. What's the intent and the aim there? If you cannot get housing, if you cannot get reentry supports to help you get a job, what do they want you to do? Fall back into trouble.
Yeah.
It's intentional.
Yeah.
It's willful. And so when we think about what we should be doing in this moment, it's not an either or. It's an all of the above. Yes, we need to be advocating. Yes, we need to be relying upon our lawyers. In this particular moment, the litigators are our best defense. I mean, research is showing right now that the people who are winning in this moment are not congressional leaders.
Yeah.
It's the litigators.
Yeah.
It's the lawyers. So investment in organizations like NAN and Ben Crump and his institutions, that's what's important. But the other thing I will say is when we look at our churches, the most revolutionary act in which our churches can engage right now is to educate our children. We are living in a society right now where less than 15% of black children are reading proficient. Less than 14% are math proficient. Yes, we need to fight against the banning of books, but the truth is our children can't even read them right now. Amen. The most revolutionary act that our churches can engage in right now, and it can go under the radar, is to teach our children to read and to write so they can gain knowledge, gain power, and be part of the revolution.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you. Attorney Tony Romanucci, you sue police officers. You fight qualified immunity, that legal shield that protects cops when they hurt people. Has the Trump administration made qualified immunity stronger since 2025? And if a family cannot afford a lawyer, how do they find someone to take their case when nobody seems to care?
This is a very important question, and I know this is probably the last answer of this panel, but I'm going to try and keep it succinct. But I'm going to paint a picture for you. About a year ago, the Trump administration started signing executive orders banning law firms from representing certain clients. That, in and of itself, is something that is the beginning of the destruction of democracy. Because when a client cannot hire the lawyer of his choosing, or a lawyer cannot represent a client that wants him to represent, that is the beginning of, like what Shakespeare said, let's kill all the lawyers. The reason he said that back in the day was because there was a monarchy. Sound familiar? And if you killed the path towards prosecuting those who are in favor of an unlawful monarchy, well then you get to do what you want, which is what's happening now. So when you couple those executive orders with what this administration is now doing by giving federal law enforcement officers impunity because they're not prosecuting, they are not investigating, they're letting them do what they want, they're letting them kill. They are literally giving them the ability to kill unlawfully without any consequences, without accountability. So have they actually strengthened qualified immunity by executive order or legislation? No. But they've been doing it with words. Every time they say he acted in self-defense, right? Because that's what you heard Kristi Noem say over and over again. He acted in defense of his life and those of others, which, by the way, are just canned narrative words to create the cover story justifying the shooting, the killing itself. So just with those words, that's how they have strengthened qualified immunity, by giving officers the ability to unjustifiably use force and get away with it. That, my friends, is qualified immunity, undefined, but by definition, that's how it's strengthened.
Sisters and brothers, I'll say this as we wrap up. We must remember what Justice Thurgood Marshall said. And he said this at the 200-year celebration of the American Constitution, Reverend Al. He said that we must remember that the basis of the American Constitution is simply this: that a black baby born to a black mother, the most uneducated black mother, the most inarticulate black mother, the most impoverished black mother, has the same exact rights as a white baby born to a white mother, the most educated white mother, the most articulate white mother, the most affluent white mother, just by virtue of that baby drawing its first breath as an American citizen. Now, Justice Marshall said, I know that's not the case in America today, but I challenge anybody to say that's not a goal worth fighting for. I challenge anybody to say that's not what makes America the beacon of hope and justice for the rest of the world. I challenge anybody to say that is not what makes America worth fighting for. So, sisters and brothers, what we have to do now more than ever, and I thank Reverend Al for leading the way, we have to make sure we fight to make the Constitution real for all Americans. Now more than ever, we got to make sure that the Constitution applies to black Americans, white Americans, brown Americans, and red Americans. Let's make the Constitution real for all Americans. And with that, we say thank you for coming to the front line to help us fight for the Constitution of the United States.
Come on, give it up, Ben Crump, Tony Ramanucci, and Attorney Jennifer Jones Austin. All right, let me redo the front, and we're going to have a very interesting discussion with a leading congressman who's been leading the fight around the Epstein files. You see him on TV a lot, Congressman Roy Connor. And then we're going to deal with equity, financial empowerment, and we'll be out by 4, so y'all can go get your doodads for the banquet tonight. All right, let's set up. All right. Our next guest is from the 17th District in California, Silicon Valley. He's the son of immigrants. And it's interesting, his journey is a testament to movements, and the promise that this country promised. His grandfather was part of Gandhi's independent movement in India that inspired Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And as a vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, he's certainly been one of the country's most consequential members of Congress, ranking member of the Select Committee on Strategic Competition. He's leading the national conversation on how we protect American jobs and master the technologies of tomorrow. But more than his titles is his courage. He has been front and center in bringing and forcing out the truth of the Epstein files and the Epstein scandal. And I'm happy he broke his schedule to come to New York and be with us today, Congressman Roy Connor of California. Congressman, thank you again, and I know you went out of your way to be here with us.
It's my honor.
We have a few things that only you can talk about. But let me start with your being vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and ranking member on the Strategic Competition Committee, and I'll get the other issues in a minute. There's a lot of concern in our community, and we have delegates from all over the country, about AI and about the technology that is advancing so quickly that some in the private sector are using it to take people off of their jobs, rise unemployment, and even when it may not be necessary. How do you see, and what can you do and get other members of Congress to do, being that you're on that committee, that protects us from, at the same time, advancing technology? I don't think any of us want to go back to the Stone Ages other than President Trump threatening Iran. But at the same time, protect people's jobs. And how do we, it's a three-part question, and how do we also make sure that we invest in communities that have been historically underserved, that they are brought up to speed in technology so they can also work in a new world?
Well, first of all, let me say, Reverend Sharpton, what an honor it is to be here. I was joking with a friend. I said, I think I finally made it as a Democrat to be invited to participate. And I'll start with someone who inspired, of course, you, but inspired all of us, Reverend Jackson, because he would come out to Silicon Valley back in the 1990s, in the 2000s, and said, what are you doing to overcome the wealth gap, racial wealth gap in Silicon Valley? Let me be very clear. We will never overcome the racial wealth gap in this country unless we overcome the racial wealth generation gap in this country. And the reality is that the black community was excluded from the agricultural revolution, excluded from the industrial revolution in many ways. Shame on us if the black community will be excluded from the AI and digital revolution. So the first thing I'm doing, and not just rhetorically, but what I've been doing for the past 10 years, You mentioned my grandfather and the connection to Gandhi and civil rights movement, but my parents wouldn't have been allowed in America if it weren't for people like you who marched and went to jail in 1965 Immigration Act. Because they didn't let folks from India into the United States of America until we had the Immigration Reform Act. And you know who hired Indian faculty when they came here? It wasn't Harvard. It was not Stanford. You ought to ask Nikki Haley, the South Carolina governor, who hired her father. It was an HBCU. Now we got all these, and I'm proud of them, we got all these Indian American leaders at these tech companies. I said, don't forget the past. So I partnered with Representative Clyburn and others, with NVIDIA and Google, to create partnerships at HBCUs. Because it's not enough to just have the words. What is the work? Where are the receipts? And we created partnerships with Claflin, South Carolina State, and about 30 other HBCUs, $5,000 scholarship, to your point, 9-month course, 10 hours a week, $75,000 job, and you can do it remotely. And those are the type of initiatives we need to make sure that the black community, talented people, have actually a stake in the digital economy and AI revolution. One more point. I used to make a joke that I taught at Stanford as an economics lecturer, and I used to say my students got funded before they had an idea. And I was at Claflin, I saw all these students, they were at brilliant ideas, brilliant execution. I said, they don't have a chance. They don't know the VC. They don't know the email address. Well, it turns out now Stanford actually has a program. There's a program that venture capitalists have called pre-idea funding, where these kids get money before they even have a business plan at Stanford. DEI, fundamentally, is merit-based. What it's saying is we see talent everywhere, and that the reason the kid in Claflin isn't getting funding is because the networks of exclusion prevent him from getting any introduction to the VC. So what we need to do is democratize the AI revolution so that in one generation, people in the African American community, the Black South, can actually build wealth to start to have economic independence. And that has to be the core of it. We can talk about what we need to do to protect jobs, but the fundamental issue has to be a wealth generation to tackle the inequality.
Having said the last part of what you said of your statement, which was very intriguing to me, is there a way that members of Congress can implore upon the tech industry, AI companies and others, that they have to include diversity? They can call it whatever they want to call it. The thing I think a lot of people miss, Congressman, is that many of us have been fighting since I was just as youth director all my life around inclusion. When George Floyd happened and his family was here earlier panel, the private sector came up with DEI, started throwing money in mostly groups that had nothing to do with the George Floyd movement. We didn't invent DEI. We fought for Civil Rights Act. We fought for affirmative action. Corporate America created DEI, then turned around and said, we're being intimidated by Trump not to do DEI. Well, call it what you want to call it, but if you want a diversified consumer base, or you want voters to put people in office that give you regulations, then you need to have a diversified workplace and training base. Is there a way for Congress and others to make sure they understand that they can't get a free range? And the day will come, maybe soon, that Donald Trump won't be there changing regulations and threatening their mergers. You know, the theme of this whole convention is we're going to straighten out tricks in 26 so we can walk through the gates in 28. And I think that's the trick. He has intimidated a lot of the private sector. And you're one of the few people in America that has openly stood up to that. And I think that they don't realize every morning we wake up is getting closer to the day that we can take the Congress and at least stop him from certain things. And the private sector doesn't understand that they will end up with a backlash from us.
Well, you make the political case very powerfully, and I make this all the time. I said, you do realize in 2026 we're going to have an African-American Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries. You do realize that when you look at all of the committees, whether it's Maxine Waters or Bobby Scott or Benny Thompson, you're going to have many African-Americans also from the South, in leadership of those committees. The politics of it, as you point out, are going to change if you have exclusionary wealth generation. You know, Reverend, we have 19 billionaires in America who have 12% of the GDP, $3 trillion.
Wow.
It is 19 billionaires. It is 3 times the wealth concentration of the Gilded Age. 3 times of the wealth concentration of Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, Vanderbilt. You can't have a nation with islands of prosperity and seas of stagnation and despair. It just does not work that way. So there's a political interest, but there is also an economic interest. We're competing with China. There are so many young, talented, passionate people who can contribute to the economy, who have ideas, who have ambition, who have hard work. They just lack the opportunity. They lack the exposure. So what we ought to be doing is having models, partnering with the HBCUs, but more broadly with universities and tech institutes and these companies to say we are going to have these courses that will credential people to get these high-paying jobs. We're going to give them capital if they want to start a small business. And we're going to work with HBCUs, community colleges, public universities across the country to scale what we've been doing ad hoc with a few of these universities. And we should have a goal, 100,000 people in a year in high-tech jobs across this country, 100,000 black Americans doing that. There's no reason we can't do it. No one has had the leadership and the initiative to do it. And then we ought to say to the billionaires, if America has been good for you, you can do good for America. We can tax them a couple percent so people have health care and child care and education in this country. And you had the courage to run on single-payer health care for everyone, national health insurance, back in 2004 when you ran for president. I remember that. I was a young man watching. And now they say it's
I was a young man running.
Now they're saying it's radical. But Jesse Jackson ran on that in 84 and 88, single-payer health care. And you know where the idea came from? It came from Bayard Rustin and Dr. King's Freedom Budget back where they said healthcare is a human right, education is a human right, jobs is a human right. We need to run on that kind of bold, transformative change as a Democratic Party. Tax billionaires, have economic Bill of Rights, have economic jobs across this country. That is not radical. That comes from the civil rights tradition. It comes from A. Philip Randolph. It comes from Bayard Rustin. It comes from Dr. King. It comes from Reverend Jackson. And it comes from you, Reverend Sharpton. And that is the vision that we need for the Democratic Party.
As the Democratic Party organizes and mobilizes, how should they strategically do and choose what they do? Because I know that some have been criticized for even going on right wing, the biker incident with one of my best friends and listeners love you, but want to know why you go biker. Tell me the strategy of how we should deal with reaching out.
We need to go everywhere to talk to people, but we need to do it not celebrating people who are engaged in racism. We have to call that out. So I think there's a very big difference, in my view, between being unequivocal in condemning, for example, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and on the other hand, which I reject, holding Charlie Kirk up as a role model for young men. We shouldn't be holding him up as a role model when he's insulted the intelligence of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama. That's not the ideal for a multiracial democracy. But, you know, I've gotten in hot water because I went on Hassan Piker's podcast. Well, Hassan Piker, I don't agree with everything, but his big issue has been the concern of Gaza. the human rights of Gaza, the human rights in Gaza. And let me say this, because you spoke out about Palestinian rights, and Jesse Jackson spoke out about Palestinian rights, and Nelson Mandela spoke out about Palestinian rights, and Dr. King spoke out about Palestinian rights before many other people did. We need to have a vision that treats brown and black people with dignity, whether they're in the United States of America or around the world. And that means you can't call the Iranian people animals. That means you can't call people in Gaza animals. That means we need to speak out against the genocide that took place in Gaza, and we need to stop providing Israel with military weapons to kill civilians. And that morality against militarism comes from the black community, comes from the traditions of W.E. Du Bois, comes from the traditions of Martin Luther King, and we need that conscience in America again.
You've been one of the members of Congress that has been the face of digging into the Epstein files. And, you know, there's an old expression, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean nobody's following me. It just seems to me that a lot of the erratic behavior that this president is engaged in is to try and keep Epstein files front and center in the American mind. I mean, I think the flood the zone strategy is what he's using. Anything. You know, 1 minute we, you know, snatching up the head of state in Venezuela, then we may go to take Cuba, nope, no, we'll take Greenland, let's go to Iran, oh no, I'll do a ceasefire, anything but let's deal with Epstein. Nigeria, Haiti. So tell us where, first of all, what is the status, in your opinion, of where we proceed with getting the evidence of the files? And what motivated you, because you clearly had to have courage to go up against this, because you're dealing with people that are very dangerous and wicked, that are involved, and others that we don't even know. But you've stood up, and I think a lot of people didn't because they think it's too dangerous. But somehow you had the moral courage, maybe it comes from your grandfather in Gandhi, to say that I'm going to take the risk, but this needs to be dealt with. And you didn't do it with a press conference. You just keep doing it. And explain to me where we are and where that kind of fire comes in you to keep going, because I don't know whether these victims, we have a lot of victims here that we've fought for down through the years, and I know what it means to victims to have somebody to stay with them even when the cameras are gone, and you've been that with the Epstein case.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Reverend. Look, I'm far from perfect, but I take my inspiration from people like you and my grandfather. When I think of the challenges we face, I said they pale in comparison to what my grandfather faced. You know, he was in jail in the 1930s under British colonialism. He went to jail in the 1940s. There are a lot of people who marched in civil rights who went to jail. And you're telling me we're going to let Donald Trump destroy our democracy? Where is our fight? Where is our contribution to the freedom struggle? Where is our sacrifice? You know, I was a little bit amused when the British press ran a headline, British monarchy jailed grandfather. Grandfather's son in Congress may bring down British monarchy with the Epstein files. But the point is that when we fight, when we push on coalitions, we can force Donald Trump to fire his own attorney general. We don't have to be helpless. We don't have to be flailing around saying we can't make a difference. So my fight comes from my grandfather. I believe my generation has been given the greatest inheritance of any generation ever. We have not had to fight colonialism in that way. We have not had to fight slavery in that way. We have not had to fight Jim Crow in the way your generation did. You've handed us all of this, and you're saying, okay, you've got a little work to do before we get to Frederick Douglass's Composite Nation. That they're not just going to hand you a line from Barack Obama on to multiracial democracy. So we need to fight. We need to fight. We're a privileged with the legacy that we've been handed. And that's where it comes from. And this Epstein class, this group of people, rich and powerful, who think the law doesn't apply to them, who think that they can rape young girls. And by the way, Reverend, they targeted working class girls. And they targeted girls without fathers. And they targeted girls who were the girls who had immigrant parents. And it was a power issue. And we've seen that issue. Anyone who studied American history knows that issue with black young girls being raped, starting from slavery. We've seen that ugliness in this country. And so I wanted to stand up against a class that thought that they did not have to obey the law, and that we'd stand up for one system of justice. And I'm going to continue to fight. We've had 3 million files released. We're going to fight till we get the 3 million others released. I've had a partner in Thomas Massie to do this in a bipartisan way. We've got billionaires against us, billionaires spending against us in my district, against Massie's district. But you know what? There's some things that people, when you stand for justice, people have your back. And that is what this fight is about and why I'm committed to continuing it.
What's the status of where everything is now?
Well, right now we've got Pam Bondi, who just today said, oh, I'm not going to come to testify before the committee, because I'm no longer Attorney General. Well, they chased down Hillary Clinton to testify, even though she hasn't been in office for 20 years. We're going to force, Nancy Mason and I are working in a bipartisan way to force Pam Bondi to appear. We're going to force Todd Blanche to appear. We're going to get any person who went to Epstein's Island to appear, and we need to start prosecutions against some of these rich and powerful people who raped these young girls. And I am committed to fighting this with the Oversight Committee and with Thomas Massie till I am in Congress, and I'm committed to making sure that whoever the next president is, they will start the prosecutions of rich and powerful people who abuse and rape these young girls.
If Pam Bondi resists coming or doesn't come, can she be held in contempt, and will there be any sting to that?
She could be held in criminal contempt by the United States Congress. Now, would we have the votes right now? I don't know. We may, because we got some Republican votes to vote with us to subpoena her, but we certainly are going to have the votes come November to hold her to contempt. I think some of these folks, have not realized that no person, no matter how powerful, has immortality in American politics. And I'm not prophetic, but I know that Donald Trump's end is coming. It's the beginning of the end. And there are some Republicans who are starting to see that he's going to be a lame duck come 2026. And they're already ducking for cover. So you're going to see more and more people jumping off the ship, more and more people holding people in contempt, and more people saying, you know what? It was fine being protected with Donald Trump, but he's not there. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get myself in trouble and destroy my life. And by the way, when we end the Donald Trump era, we need healing, and of course we need a forward vision, but we also need accountability for the crimes he committed and the people who committed those crimes.
Yes, political
That's, of
end,
course,
right.
political end.
Thank you. You're right. No, he knows how these people distort stuff with me and you. Thank you. Let me ask this: if you were able to give the Democratic Party, Hakeem Jeffries and others will be here tomorrow, how they need to campaign to win, and because a lot is at stake. But the question is, are they reaching people enough to bring them out? What advice would you give your party?
Well, first of all, I'm a supporter of Hakeem Jeffries. I believe he will be Speaker of the House, and he will be the first black Speaker of the House, and I believe he will do that with unanimity. But I would say we need more moral clarity in our party and conviction in our party. I called for the 25th Amendment and impeachment when Donald Trump threatened genocide of the Iranian people. And I'm tired of people saying, well, do we have the votes? What does the polling say? What do the swing voters think? What are the tactics? How about a president of the United States should not threaten genocide for a civilization? How about America should not be threatening starvation of Cuba with a fuel blockade? How about we are going to stand for human rights in this country? We're going to stand for economic rights and economic justice, and we're going to stand for a moral vision of America. What I would say is the Democratic Party, we need to let it rip a little more. We need to talk about our moral vision a little bit more. We need to be conviction-based. And we should take inspiration from people who came from the civil rights movement, because we forget that Dr. King, when he was assassinated, was deeply unpopular because he spoke against the Vietnam War, because he spoke against the military budget. You have Donald Trump proposing $1.5 trillion of a Pentagon budget, and some of our senators saying, well, we'll study it, we'll consider it. No, we will reject it. We will reject it because we'd rather put that money in child care and health care and education for our people. Speak with moral clarity. Speak with our moral vision, inspired from Douglas to King to what a multiracial democracy with economic justice looks like. We ought to be running on Bayard Rustin's vision of a freedom budget. We ought to be running on Frederick Douglass's vision of a composite nation. We should be proud of being an immigrant nation, proud of being a multiracial democracy, proud of fighting for economic justice, and let the chips fall where they may. But you know what I believe? I believe people will respond to that. You know how I know people will respond to that? Because people have responded to that message when it's delivered with conviction in this country.
When I got the info that you would come, one of the things that I think that is going to be necessary is for the, quote, progressives work along in coalition with the civil rights and everybody else. And I think that too often, you are an exception, that a lot of the progressive leaders are just as exclusionary as some of the conservative leaders. So, and the example I used is how many of them would come to an NAACP or National Action Network convention. Many of the ones national didn't even go to Jesse Jackson's funeral, all viewing his body. So you can't be progressive to me if what is dear to me is not part of it. That's how you build coalition. That's why I went out of my way to make sure I marched up front with De Niro on the No Kings March. But I think where I agree with you, you got to reach out to everybody. I think that one of the lessons progressives can learn from you is everybody's everybody. You can't say I gotta talk to a right winger, but I can't make none of the civil rights conventions and Jesse Jackson's funeral.
Let me say this, and maybe you'd agree with me, Reverend Sharpton. The black civil rights movement were the progressives.
That's right.
They are the progressives. You think the idea of Medicare for all is a new idea? That was an idea out of Rustin's freedom budget. You look at Dr. King and what he proposed in this country against militarism, materialism, against racism, and I would argue no one has been more progressive in this country. No one's been more progressive than W.E.B. Du Bois. No one's been more progressive than Jesse Jackson's campaign twice in 1984 and 1988. No one was more progressive than the agenda you ran on in 2004. So I come to the black community in the Black South and with the civil rights community with humility. With humility. I once gave a nominating speech for Mr. Clyburn. I was a co-chair of Bernie Sanders' campaign, and people said, bro, why did you speak in favor of Jim Clyburn? I said, you know what? I wouldn't be born in America if it weren't for Jim Clyburn going to jail. I owe a debt to the civil rights movement in this country. I owe a debt to the people who've marched for freedom and civil rights and economic freedom. So to me, I believe the black community has been the conscience of America, and I go not in a way of outrage. I go with humility to learn and appreciate what happened and to say, how do we now take all of that forward to build a multiracial democracy with economic stakes for everyone, and where I can offer something, seeing Silicon Valley, seeing the economic future, extend my hand in creating that opportunity. And I believe that those are the guiding lights for our nation.
We're out of time, but I have to ask you. There are those that have raised the prospect that you should run for president. And you're
going to be my running mate?
Well, I mean, we'll have to poll what a Sharpton kind of ticket looks like. No, but I mean, first of all, would you consider it, and are you ruling it out?
Well, first of all, and I'm not saying this to avoid, I'll give you a direct question, but our first focus has to be to make Hakeem Jeffries Speaker of the House. Because you could rest assured Mike Johnson is not going to be swearing in any Democratic president in 2029. So we need the House of Representatives to stop Trump's corruption and to make sure we have any shot at 2028. But look, I believe I offer two things for why I will consider it to America. One is I represent the economic future, and I have a clear roadmap of how we're going to make sure every part of this country has an economic stake in the future, whether that is workers having equity, whether it is the Black South being part of the AI revolution, whether it is making sure that families actually have economic independence with health care and child care. I have a comprehensive economic vision, and I believe that people need an economic vision. And secondly, I fundamentally believe, because of my grandfather, that we need to move beyond a colonial model of the world, that we have this incredible moment, because of people like you, Reverend Sharpton, my generation, we have this moment to finally see what Frederick Douglass prophesied in 1869 in Composite Nation. You know, Douglass, 20 years after being enslaved, he didn't speak out first for just black Americans. He said Chinese Americans, Chinese have the right to come to America. Because in the free era of America, the best traditions will survive and the worst will be discarded. And America will become a composite nation, a nation of all nations, a nation of people with people of all backgrounds. I see that in the energy in our nation with young people. And I believe a multiracial America will finally be just not only here, but just around the world. And that calling of understanding the economy and wanting to see a cohesive multiracial democracy says, maybe I have something to offer and contribute with humility to our nation at this moment.
Roy Connor, Congressman Roy Connor. Give him a hand. All right, let us bring on our equity panel, and then we're getting ready for the dinner. You don't want to miss this, Black Wealth and Equity.
It looks bad now. Look at Iran. Look at what's going on in Minnesota. Look on. Yeah, but I was raised by them to realize that after storms, if we do the right thing in the storm, if we organize, if we register, if we do what we're supposed to do, there's always a rainbow coming out. The rainbow don't show until the storm is over. The rainbow gonna come out in November. The rainbow gonna come out in 28. We're gonna fix these tricks in 26 and march through the gates in 28. We didn't come this far to turn around now. We won't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back.
We won't go back. Good afternoon, everyone. No, we can do better than that. Everyone stand up for a minute, stretch, because we need your full attention. I need your blood flow working. Stand up. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, NAN is awesome, but the real blessing for you today is that you're sitting next to me. All right, give each other a high five and take your seats.
I said, when they need somebody to do
My name is Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. I'm the international president and CEO of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and the chairwoman of the Divine Nine Council of Presidents and founder of the Faithpreneur TV network. I'm Jamaican. I have a lot of jobs.
All right.
But I'm excited to be here with you today for the Equity Blueprint, a new strategy for home ownership and wealth. Joining me today is the Honorable Mercedes Narcisse, council member of the 46th District for New York City Council. Reverend Dr. Adolphus C. Lacey, pastor of Bethany Baptist Church of Brooklyn. Jamie Smart, president and CEO of the New York City Housing Partnership. Unique N. Brady, VP of Customer Growth Segments, lead at Wells Fargo Home Lending. And Ashley Thomas III, president of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, affectionately known as NARAB. Let's give all of our panelists some love. Y'all sound like your hands getting tired. Just give them some love. So this panel, in honor of the 35th year of the National Action Network's movement, we recognize that housing stability is a cornerstone of civil rights, economic dignity, and generational wealth. At a time when affordability pressures are rising and home ownership remains out of reach for far too many, our Black families are suffering, and this conversation will focus on practical, actionable solutions. We're bringing together leaders from public policy, faith, housing development, finance, and real estate to explore strategies that expand access, protect ownership, preserve family wealth, and create stronger pathways to home ownership and long-term economic stability. Can we give a round of applause to Reverend Sharpton for keeping this work alive for 35 years? So let's just dive right in. I'm going to start with three of our panelists on this question, Councilmember Narcisse, Ashley Thomas, and Jamie Smart. We're in a national housing affordability crisis that is pricing people out of their own neighborhoods. New York City is facing a crisis where hundreds of thousands of Black New Yorkers have left the city. At the same time, residents across the country are using housing platforms to help cover rent, mortgages, or rising property taxes. With many cities and towns included, even across the river in New Jersey, we are ensuring that residents can reap benefits. We know the World Cup is coming, and we need to be prepared. But in New York, that legislative freedom has and is being stopped. So I'm going to ask, Councilmember, why is the legislative fight for the freedom to host so critical for New Yorkers who need extra income to stay in their homes? And that's my first shout out to the sponsor of this panel, Airbnb.
Dr. Grant, I want to say thank you. I want everyone here to understand what's going on. We had a local law 18 that took place. It was well intended to take out the bad players, the bad actors, people that was buying home in our neighborhood and change them into a hotel. And those are the reasons that local law was passed. But at the same time, we, especially the Black and brown communities, losing out. Because right now, we have so much pressure with paying bills in New York City, paying taxes in New York City. So we need to look at it to see what is the best way we can bring solution to that problem. Right now, we're talking about over 200,000 Black folks left New York City because they could not afford it. Over 200,000. And in the black community, my community, for instance, I represent 46th District, which cover Canarsie, Flatland, Georgetown, Bergen Beach, Mill Bay, St. Milan, and Marine Park, Garrison Beach, and Shipshead Bay. And East Flatbush, Crown Heights for district leader. I have seen it firsthand, how black community having difficulty to hold their home. So now we said that we can bring solution to the problem. 948A, look, the law that I'm pushing forward is to making sure that folks, instead of having 2 hosts in their house, they host 2 people, 2 guests, now they can do 4. And they can have lock in on their own bedroom. That's not disturbing anyone. And actually, they can pay their taxes. They can help them to stay in New York City. So that's the solution to the problem.
And thank you. Yes, we can give a round of applause because we can talk about the problem all day, but that's a solution, and we appreciate you being at the table to advocate. So before I go to Jamie, I want to come to you, Ashley. We're talking about opportunities with this law passing. You work with NARAB, with real estate investors, those who have their own properties, investment properties. What is your take on how NARAB is pushing forward the need for these opportunities in this bill to pass?
Thank you, Dr. Grant. I think, one, we have to realize how we got here in terms of policy. It's something that we've always been engaged with, but it's actually, homeownership has actually changed. It's about profit over people. It's about fees over family. And so we need to get back into understanding that the American dream was about owning a home. And so NARAB is really focused on education. We are extremely focused on getting out and outreaching in terms of how we can do better in the space of homeownership, but let's understand that we have to be more involved in terms of the policy. Our voice has to be heard. Yesterday, the mayor of New York came out and said white households in the city are over $200,000 in terms of wealth, and black households are under $20,000. That stems from homeownership. It does. The first 35 years of FHA lending, which most black people of color take a part of in buying their first home, for the first 35 years, only 2% went to people of color. And so we understand that policy created the gap, and policy, once again, can correct it.
Absolutely. And building on that, Jamie, how does the right for this wealth preservation tool that we're looking at for the families facing pressures of rising costs and gentrification, tell us a little bit about the housing platforms that can be utilized to impact this work that we've outlined.
Well, first of all, I want everyone in this room to know that the New York City Housing Partnership is here for Black and Latino homeownership. Last year, we helped 500 New Yorkers become homeowners. And a lot of people don't know this, but the city will give you up to $125,000 to help you buy your first home. And it is intentional that this information is not out in the general public. So in any forum I go to, it's the first thing I say. We helped 500 people become homeowners last year, but that number should really be like 5,000 people. So please visit our website, and we will guide you through the process. Because as the panelists just mentioned here, it's very deliberate. These tools have been used to exclude Black and Latinos from home ownership. And New York City right now has an economic base of about $3 trillion. But it didn't get $3 trillion unintentionally. That came about as a result of Black and Latino families staying in New York City in the 80s and 90s when people did not want to live here. We were the ones who stayed and built our neighborhoods back to greatness. So to now be told that we cannot use our homes for short-term rentals, while the more and more fees and fines get piled on. The city just introduced composting fines and fees last year on top of the tax burden. All these things are working together to actually drive people out of the city. So we are squarely on the public policy platform with Councilwoman Narcisse to support tools that will help Black and brown people become homeowners. And we will continue to talk about these things in a way that's very significant.
We appreciate that. You said $125,000 towards buying your first home. I just wanted to say that for Sister Cantaloupe, who might be in the back and didn't hear. So we need to connect with you. Just tell us really quickly your website before I go over to our sister Uniquely to talk about Wells Fargo and some of the financial implications. How can they find out where to find you?
Housingpartnership.com. The New York City Housing Partnership, a lot of people don't know, was founded by Mayor Koch in 1983, and boy, would he'd be astonished to see me being the CEO today. But that is nothing but the spirit moving, I tell you, that I'm now the CEO of an institution that Mayor Koch, of all people, created. But housingpartnership.com, we are ready to work with you.
God has a way of working in mysterious ways. So now we're going to go over to you, Uniquely, to talk about the years of commitment that has happened from the banking sector. Black ownership still remains significantly lower, as we've just heard, than the national average. So from the perspective of one of the country's largest lenders, what is the current state of home ownership for Black families, and understanding how Wells Fargo is using an equity blueprint to address the credit and mortgage hurdles that have historically locked too many people in our community out of the market?
Well, thank you, Dr. Grant, and it's an honor and it's exciting to be here along with my colleagues at Wells Fargo at the NAN convention to have this critical conversation about housing. And when we talk about the progress among Black families and homeownership, it's important to note that there has been progress made. And where we're seeing challenges is that the gap, the national homeownership gap and the gap between Black homeownership, the disparity is still large and it remains persistent. And that's where the real challenges are lying and where we're wanting to see more growth. And part of that comes from the long-standing challenges, the barriers to homeownership that we've seen. This is the wealth and income gaps, inventory shortages, limited access to affordable housing, the rising interest rate costs that we've seen kind of ebb and flow over the years. And these are really situations that are outside of any one entity's span of control, but it's a space that Wells Fargo is focused on being active in ways that we can present solutions and a path forward. And so one thing that we have seen when there's a strong demand and readiness when it comes to Black families and home ownership, and if you look at what the industry and the GSEs qualify as readiness, that's having the credit and the income to qualify for a mortgage. And that demand is strong and it's prevalent among Black borrowers. What we're finding, however, is that barriers to home ownership are coming up earlier in the journey and the process to step into mortgage production and taking on a mortgage product or to go into home ownership. And so these are credit challenges, bringing cash to close, and having access to down payment assistance. And our focus is to meet customers where they're at, providing opportunities for education and building pathways and having a trajectory for sustainable home ownership. It's not enough for us for Black families to get into a home. We want to make sure that we're creating sustainable long-term success in home ownership so that you have that asset to pass down for generational wealth.
Absolutely. And Dr. Lacey, coming to you, we have major financial and business platforms that are represented here, but history shows that resources do not move without intentional advocacy. And you're a pillar of National Action Network, and we know that NAN specific agitation and organizing and policy helps to make sure we keep these corporate entities accountable. What and why can we not simply wait for the market to fix itself without pressure from NAN and the work that we're doing around this housing crisis?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Grant. And so we start with Frederick Douglass. There is no progress if there is no protest. And so we have to be able to continue to advocate, and then we educate. And sometimes those are two different elements in this regard as to the assets that we have and how they're used. And sometimes it has to be a more complicated conversation because we are renters and we are owners. That's the point. Y'all hear? We are renters and owners at the same time. And how do we find a just system that is fair for a renter and fair for an owner? And so you do so by trying to create a context for us to have a dialogue about what we're doing, and particularly showing what we have done in our best practices. And I currently serve as the co-chair of East Brooklyn Congregations with Metro IAF, and we have now contributed to $1 billion in equity with the Nehemiah houses in East New York. So again, it's the best practices, and our process that we're currently using right now is called public land for public good. So you're trying to find underutilized public land to try to use it for the public good. And so if somebody puts up something and then the city and the state and the federal government puts up something, then you're able to do that. And I can just tell you right now, we're so excited that over the next 2 years, we're doing 4,000 housing units, 20% ownership and 80% rental. You know, so those are the things that we try to do, but you do so in partnership with a moral imperative to say that we have to do something. That's the deal. You can't sit still with this affordability gap and just sit out, as we have already heard multiple times, but don't let it shock you. With 200,000 black families leaving New York City. That affects our schools, that affects our churches, that affects our parks. And so now, how do we leverage an asset that we have to be able to make our communities better? Because once you own, you stabilize. And Absolutely. So there is a moral imperative that we will argue for, that God put the human in the garden and said, develop it. And that's what we are doing. We are developing our own gardens. And if you take redlining out, if you take racism out, we can develop our own. You take gentrification out, we can develop our own communities with the right assets.
Absolutely. For those of us who go to church, this is the point where we say amen. So we only have about 15 or less, 13 minutes left for this panel, and I want each of the panelists to be able to do a deep dive on some actionable items that we can take away from this conversation. I'll start by sharing, as the chair of the Divine Nine, that's the Council of Presidents for the National Panhellenic Council, each of us are committed to making sure that our members are aware about our work in economic stability. I want to thank NARAB and NAN for being one of our national partners. So let's round of applause for both of them as we continue this work in our members and the communities that we serve. But we have debt theft, we have stolen property issues. The list is so long about how to protect our properties with legacies, wills, and trusts, understanding what that looks like. And this is just the start of the conversation. I want each of our panelists to give us a 2-minute, one, contact for follow-up information so you can take action and when you go back to your community, and then 2, what the vision is. I believe you have to speak it before you see it. So what is your vision on how we truly make sure that this blueprint is one that we can preserve intergenerational wealth through home ownership? I'm going to start with Jamie, and I'm going to crisscross across the stage. 2 minutes each.
Thank you so much. One of the things that we focus on, and I think this is a really big thing that people need to realize, is that the economy is rapidly changing, and it's restructuring itself. For example, we see individuals seeking to become homeowners, they don't have W-2s anymore. Because those jobs, those W-2 jobs are gone. They don't have salaries, they're gig workers. So the economy has restructured itself. We have people earning nice incomes, $85,000, $100,000, who are earning it from DoorDash, any of these things that won't give you a salary. So we have started a specific advocacy that is actually being supported by Airbnb, and I really applaud them for their leadership here, to go to lenders and say, we need to have a different conversation because these people deserve to become homeowners, but they don't have a traditional salary and there's no paycheck stub that they can show you. But these people deserve access to lending. Again, I am a true acolyte of the power of owning a home towards building wealth. And we need to be able to help our gig workers access those dreams as well. So that's one of the things that we started in 2026 is specific outreach to gig workers. So if you know gig workers, people who say, I never thought I'd be becoming a homeowner because I don't have pay stubs to show anybody. Send them to the Housing Partnership, please.
Well, that is an actionable item. Thank you so much for that. Let's give Jamie Starr another round of applause. I'm going to come over to you for your 2 minutes, uniquely. Thank you for representing Wells Fargo. What is your charge to us as the follow-up action from today?
So at Wells Fargo, we're focused not only on our products and programs, but also aligning with our national partners as well to address the friction points that we've all kind of spoke of earlier today. And I would encourage folks, we do have the opportunity here at NAN to have trusted advisors available for you. There is a resource center room that will be available starting tomorrow between the hours of 10 and 4. This is an opportunity to engage in one-on-one conversations. Within the room, we've brought together our partners in collaborative effort to provide housing and credit counseling on site, the opportunity to talk to loan officers firsthand about the homeownership journey, to understand from real estate professionals with our partners at NAREB on what properties are available across the country. These aren't just for folks who are here in New York City, but an opportunity if you're in other municipalities across the country to have those connection points. We look to create housing, education, and access so that you have trusted partners. There's a lot of folks out there sharing information, but you want to build a network of folks who are qualified and truly have your best interests in heart and are able to walk with you through this journey from start to finish. And a lot of y'all have the understanding that once you get to the closing table, that's when you're finished. That's really the start of your journey. When you talk about nurturing your garden, you're planting those seeds for your generational wealth. You're putting them on fertile ground, not rocky ground. And so you want to make sure that you're investing in yourself while you're here and take those actionable items to meet with us in the Resource Center and have an opportunity to start your plan, get pre-qualified, and understand what your financial picture looks like and how you can start your own home ownership journey.
Awesome. Can we give a round of applause to Unique M. Brady from Wells Fargo? And we're going to come over to our Councilwoman Narcisse. What is your final charge in 2 minutes or less?
First, Dr. Grant, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Reverend Al Sharpton for having this opportunity for us to have a real conversation. Now, to all of you, I see Dr. Cody from my district. I see a few folks that I realize that I see here, and I'm so happy that you're all here. But the question is, do you believe that black and brown people deserve to stay in New York City and own their home? Do you believe that we need to create opportunity for them? Do you believe that they need to leave their home for their kids for generation to generation? Do you believe that we are part of the structure of New York City? And you heard it from my colleagues when everybody was leaving the city of New York, but a lot of black and brown folks stayed to build it up. So do we deserve our fair share? All right, so now it's quite difficult for us to do that because the bills is going higher and higher. We cannot pay the taxes. Like I said, my district, we lost over 268 to be exact of houses that we lost or more. We have a problem in our hands. We passed a bill where we said that local law 18 gonna solve all the problem, and the rent, we're taking all the renters out. If we turn it into Airbnb, guess what? The rent been going up 8% to be exact. So having that opportunity to keep your home is giving back to the city because you will be able to pay your taxes. That's what the local law 18 had done, and now we're trying to correct it with 948A. When you hear, it's not an Airbnb bill. It is a homeowner opportunity bill for us to stay in New York City to be able to do that. And two things I'm going to say. What it does, instead of having 2 guests, you can have 4. Now you can, no, 3 things to be exact. Now you can lock a room or a closet. I'm asking for the room to save your property if you're leaving your guests in your home. 3, you're able to, if you have an emergency, you can leave the city, you can go take care of your family if you have an emergency. This is not a lot. So I'm asking all of you, when you hear about when the narratives are coming, saying, no, you're going to take tenant, out of your building and all that, that's not true. So just say that people that work so hard, 3 or 4 jobs to have a home, deserve to keep their home. And we're going to give them the opportunity to host. That's all it is, nothing more. So now, when you hear about it, I want you to call your council members. All your council, every one of you have a council member if you live in New York City. Find out. If you don't know, you can reach out to me. 718-241-9330. I'll be the source for you. We're going to fight to win this, and we're not going to let big folks, other folks, hotel folks, to stop us from having our opportunity. That's all I'm saying. When you hear the call, holla at me. So let's get it passed because we deserve it. We deserve to keep our home.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Let's give Councilwoman Mercedes Narcisse another round of applause. We're rounding out. Rev. Dr. Alfonso C. Lacey, what's your charge in 90 seconds?
My charge in the final seconds is, again, we always hear these phrase, thoughts and prayers, and I'm thinking of Psalm 121, 5 and 6. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade upon your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day nor the moon by night. And you think about the aspect of covering, but then it gets just too simple to make God so esoteric. Some of us already have our houses, and I had an opportunity. I thank the Councilwoman for Mercedes for being able to share that. I wrote 2 op-eds, one in the Amsterdam News and one in the Caribbean Times, talking about the value of being able to use our own home ownership as the World Cup is coming here, and we're not allowed to be able to fully tap into the greatest asset that we have. And so to go back, Dr. Scott, to your first question is that's what the agitation is. You have to put pressure. Just because you look like us don't mean you vote like us. You have to put pressure on what is important for our community, the greatest assets that we have. Watch this. When you talk about land ownership, the greatest landowner in the world is the Catholic Church. The greatest black landowner is the AME Church. It is assets that we have, and how can you leverage your asset for such a time as this that actually is a once-in-a-lifetime moment? So you look at those type of things and put pressure on politicians to be able to do your bidding from a moral standpoint. That's what I seek to do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lacey. We appreciate that agitation. We know about it. No justice? No peace. I was just making sure you're still awake here. And now we're going to round out our comments with Ashley Thomas III from NARAB. What's your charge to us today?
Thank you, Dr. Grant. And I want to thank Reverend Al Sharpton for allowing us to be here. This is a great panel. Talks about how we build our communities, the National Action Network. I thank Wells Fargo and Airbnb because it's very important as we move into this fight that we move in with partners that really care about what's going on in our communities. And so I'm very appreciative of that. The state of housing, the state of black home ownership in America is at an emergency stage. And we have to recognize that. NARAB was founded in 1947, and we have to continue the fights even after they die on social media. Appraisal bias is still an issue today. Discriminatory underwriting is still an issue today. Student loan debt is greater than a mortgage. $500,000 coming out of college when you can buy a house for $200,000 in some markets. I know, not New York. I'm in Los Angeles. I understand. But I want to say that we got to continue to fight as we move forward. NAREB, NAREB.com is where you can go and find more information. We have Realtors members that will help in this fight. If you want to buy a home, we want to meet you there. If it takes you 5 years, we want to start the process today. We cannot wait any longer. There has never been a 5-year period since the late 1960s where in 5 years from today, the house was worth less than what it is when you bought it. And so we have to understand economics. We have to understand what that means for mortgage payments and what that means for affordability. So thank you for having Dr. Grant.
Thank you. Can we give Ashley another round of applause? Thank you. And the entire panel. I know the time was limited, but the information was rich. So I hope that you took notes, that you took the contact information so that you can follow up, whether it's for you directly, whether it's for a family member or someone in community. Reverend Sharpton's vision is to make sure that we are constantly educating ourselves so that nothing catches us blind, that we know how to take action, and as Reverend Lacey said, we know how to keep agitating those who don't want to see change. So not on our watch. What did Reverend Sharpton tell us? We're not going back. We're going forward, and we're going to continue to ensure that there is equity in this housing blueprint for ownership and intergenerational wealth. My name is Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. It's been a pleasure being your moderator for this panel, and we're off to the next part of our program.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Shh, shh, shh. Come on, let's give it up for Dr. Grant this morning in this panel. Listen, we need everyone to vacate this room immediately. We need everyone to please vacate the room immediately. Please vacate the second floor and go down to the first floor. If you do not have your tickets, go down to the first floor. We have to empty this room immediately. Please, everyone, please leave the room. If you're sitting in your seat, you're not departing the room. Please leave the room. Thank you. Thank you. Please vacate the room. Thank you so much. And vacate the second floor. We need the second floor cleared off. Please vacate the room and the second floor. Thank you so much for your cooperation.
Never too much, never too much, never too much.
Security, can you open those side doors so they can vacate out this door? Open these other doors so they can vacate the room. If you're standing in the room, please vacate. Open all the doors so they can vacate the room. Security, open those other doors. Thank you so much.